Welcome to the Why Music podcast, where we talk to independent artists about their journeys, the inspirations behind their music, and ultimately why they make music. This next artist is a jack of all trades when it comes to genres. One half of the folky-pop experimental project, Linear Process, he's now venturing into his own sound. Welcome, Noah.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for being
It's an
here.
honor. It's a pleasure. Oh, dude, I couldn't be more stoked to be here. And I'm sorry that it's taken so long to make it happen.
We're here now. That's all that matters.
That is all that
Um,
matters.
I always like to start with where your music journey kind of all started.
It all began one fateful day, January 31st, 2001. I believe that was my fourth birthday, if I have my math right. I know it was my fourth birthday. It's the 2001. That is maybe if I'm getting my math wrong on it. Anyway, my fourth birthday. Um, one of my aunts, she handed me two albums. They were Hybrid Theory by Linkin Park and Meteora by Linkin Park. She was like, "This is what I'm into. Have a listen. Happy birthday." Um, and it's so funny. Just the like super naive things for us as like adults, but
Hmm.
you remember being a kid and you just sort of start realizing things. You start drawing conclusions about how the world works. I was listening to Hybrid Theory and Meteora, and I remember thinking, wait, so these guys just like got together and like made these sounds? And then my aunt was like, yeah, duh. And I was like, that's so cool. And that's all I've wanted to do since.
I'm curious what the judgment call was on giving Linkin Park albums to a 4-year-old, but
Listen, Lincoln Park's for everybody.
um, so then from there, when did it turn into like musicianship and songwriting and artistry and all
Sure.
that fun stuff?
Yeah. So from there, of course, that sparked my interest in, consuming and the sort of ideation of creating music,
Hmm.
but it didn't become tangible, of course, until I was a little older. Um, my mom and her two sisters, they were all band kids growing up. So band and music had been talked about often when I was growing up. Um, and it got to a certain point when I was in like middle school where I started showing interest in doing that as well. I'm not a sports guy, if you couldn't tell from the everything about me. And so I was like, I think I might give this music thing a try. And then my mom sort of seeded the idea of taking piano lessons. Started taking piano lessons. The next year, went into like junior high or middle school or whatever. Um, and then while I was taking piano lessons, joined band, trombone kid, later joined choir into high school. So it all just sort of stemmed from having a lightly musical family and I being sort of one of the first to like really like, no, I really want to like do this. I want to spend my time doing this. You know what I mean? Whereas previous generations, it was a hobby or something they did, just sort of to blow off steam. I was the first one that was like, no, this is actually fun. And it's the only thing I like actually want to do. You know what I mean? Did that answer your question? Or
Pretty
did I just sort
much.
of ramble?
Pretty much. No, that no. So at what point along all of those different stages was it, you started writing music and
Oh,
getting to those
yeah.
points and, doing the artist thing or, developing into what became linear process and so forth.
Sure, sure. So yeah, growing up, band kid, music kid, playing piano, choir kid. I started writing down songs, which is simply to say lyrics in a composition notebook, which I actually still have somewhere over there. Um, when I was in middle school in band, taking piano lessons, and I would just sort of sit at the piano, um, just sort of plunking around, finding interesting sounds, interesting chords, interesting little mini melodies, um, and I'd write down lyrics too in that notebook. So that was about I want to say middle school, late middle to late middle school. Um, and I just sort of developed from writing things in the notebook to one of my band directors gave me a copy of Mixcraft, which is a DAW, a digital audio workstation. Much like GarageBand, much like Pro Tools, Ableton, etc. It was my first one, though. Um, and he was like, "You seem interested in this sort of thing. If you're ever interested in actually like recording and making like a real project out of these little ditties that you're spending your time doing, um, give this a shot." And so I went home and I downloaded Mixcraft and I got to work. Let me tell you, I still have so many of those old middle school, early high school demos from what is now a very outdated software. Mixcraft 5, it was. I think they're on 10 now. Um, and just sort of like developing those things or making little beats from there. Um, that sort of well, I should say that was the thing that made it tangible, really. That was the thing that actually connected it back to, I was like, oh, this is how those guys did it all the way back in 2001. And I was like, I can do it too. um yeah. So that whole process of like, it's all sort of just bleeds into starting from piano lessons and band and taking it into the computer room from that band director.
As someone who studied music production in college, I can honestly say I've never heard of Mixcraft.
Yeah, not many people have, and as someone who studied music production in college, myself as well, I was the only one of my classmates who had ever heard of Acoustica Mixcraft. Um, and let me tell you, I'm not sponsored, although I'm open for it, Acoustica. I'm not sponsored by Mixcraft, but I will say it is an awesome program. It's incredibly affordable, and truly, I might I might catch this might be a hot take, but I really do think it is like at the like same level, or you can make it at the same level as like a Reaper or a Logic or something like that. And that's why I love it so much, is because it is so affordable, and it is that good. And I still sometimes pull up my old projects and try to like tweak them from that, although I have since sort of switched to being an Ableton main over the last 8 or so years.
Putting it on the same level of Reaper, to me, almost it feels like different. Like to me, like I started in Reaper because one of my friends had it, so kind of the same
Ah,
situation. I'm now a Logic person. I don't even see those the same way, but I also like, it's like anything where it's like some things are just better suited for different people. I could never use
yeah.
Ableton. Ableton feels too outdated to me, the way that it's structured and everything. And
Ooh,
I can't.
outdated.
I not well, it looks archaic. It looks archaic. It looks archaic. And
Okay.
Logic looks all like
Okay.
clean and everything. It's like, well,
Sure.
I'm an Apple girl through and through. Like
Okay.
Logic is just right there with it. So but
Yeah, if you're an Apple person, then Logic is logically going to be
yeah.
your sort of go-to, because it does just integrate so
Mhm.
well with the Apple OS, right? Um, and I take your point about like it's kind of apples and oranges sometimes comparing different DAWs, because they are just, some of them are suited for just so many different workflows and
Yeah.
styles. I mostly meant that in like, um,
You
some
can get the same
people
result.
will some people will look at like a garage band and be like, oh well, you're not going to get anywhere using that program, which is bullshit, right? It comes down to the art and how good the art is, not the tools that made it. That's a whole nother discussion, though. I was more meaning that like someone might look at Mixcraft and assume it's at
Up
the
on that
level of like
level.
a garage band, when, in my opinion, it is at the level of like a Logic or a Reaper or an Ableton.
Ah, I see. I see. I see. All right. Well, yeah, I definitely like I can't believe I've heard of a lot of them, but that one is just that's never once heard that before. That's
I
nuts.
recommend checking it out.
um so this is still kind of continuing along the same lines.
Mm-hmm.
At what point along writing all of these things and then bringing it into Mixcraft and turning it into songs and whatnot, at what point where you're like, okay, let's put some of this out? Or at what point were you like, did it become the collaborative project that was Linear Process? And what point did you kind of decide to now do your own thing? And what
Mm-hmm.
is that sort of part of the timeline been all like?
Yeah, it's kind of a big jumble because my latest release, Rain, um, I wrote in that early era. I wrote it 12 years ago. Um, when I was 14. I wrote Rain when I was 14, 12 years ago. But Linear Process came out when I was pretty much fresh out of college. So we're talking late 2019. Or yeah, late 2019 is when I first started like got the ball rolling on creating Linear Process. And that was because I went to Stetson University. I studied music technology, uh, which was sort of a half and half blend of their uh, uh, like music conservatory style, very classically trained um, music school, and their digital arts program. Um, and one of my best friends, who was also in the digital arts program and who was in my like class level, we were both class of 2019, um, Larissa Hanson. Um, we both graduated at the same time, fresh out of college. I was working an awful job at an awful AV company, and she moved up back home up north. And I don't remember all the details of what she was doing, but I knew that she was frustrated with a lot of her like day job situations, right? And I realized we had a lot in common. We were both very frustrated about the fact that we weren't spending our time creating music, which is both why we went to college, right, in order to sort of make those connections and you know learn how to do that professionally, right? And so I was on my way to work, and it was like so early. It hadn't like this. It was a couple hours before sunset still, and I was like, "This is bullshit." And you know who else would agree? Larissa. So I parked, and I sent her a text, and I was like, "Hey, do you want to make an album?" Um, I believe actually my words were, "Yo, you want to make an album?" And to my surprise, 3:30 a.m. she texts back at 3:32 and says, "Hell yeah." So that's how Linear Process started. Right out of college, we were both feeling frustrated with our day-to-day lives, and we were like, we're not creating enough. Let's get together and make a reason for us to create stuff. Um, and so all the stuff on the Linear Process record, that was with one exception. One of those songs was not fully a 50-50 collaboration, but every other song was, where she was like the primary lyricist, I was a primary producer, instrumentalist. We outsourced a couple of features, like our friends Justin Dallasay, Andrew Pemberton, Neville Williams, for guitar and bass work and stuff, because I can't play guitar and bass. Um, uh, and so that's how that came together. Um, but again, like I said, it's sort of a jumble. So that happened pretty late. 2019, 2020, 2021 is when we actually released that album, In Good Health. Um, Shortly after which the band sort of dissipated. Larissa and I are still on good terms. We're still friends and everything. There's no drama. We just sort of realized that like we should maybe also try some solo stuff. And so over the last few years, after that band sort of dissolved, I was like, well, I still need to create stuff. I've sort of gotten myself in this hole, and the only way out is to keep making stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and so even though I do prefer to be working collaboratively with other people, at least for the time being, I have years and years of demos and song ideas from when I was like 14 onwards. I can start pulling from stuff like that. All the while, basically, all throughout this timeline, there are a couple projects that I've sort of come back to every now and again and updated them, tweaked them. And my latest song, Rain, was one of them. That was the first song I wrote that I ever felt like proud of. I was like, wow, this is actually kind of like, I have some good ideas here, I think. Um, and one of my friends that I mentioned earlier, Andrew Pemberton, he plays bass on Timing, the Linear Process song. He and I have worked on a couple of songs throughout the decade, and Rain is one of them. So I reached out to him again, and I was like, hey, I think I'm getting ready to finally release a like definitive first version of the song Rain that we wrote when we were kids. Um, and he was super supportive. He was like, hell yeah, let's go for it. Um, so that's how that came about. So even though it was seeded way earlier, Linear Process happened first, and now Rain and all those other things are going to be happening after.
I Yeah, it's interesting how when you look at it from a not knowing perspective and you think, oh, like linear process came first, but it's like it's a moment in a greater
Yeah.
timeline of like this other thing that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, very interesting that it just kind of was a like random like moment and then it just kind of became a whole album. It's like just a few texts
Mm-hmm.
became a whole collaborative project. Um,
It did, man, and that's what I loved about it. That's what I loved about it so much. That's what I love about music making is the collaborative aspect and how a simple you want to make an album can become like I'm still so proud of that album. I think it was magical in some ways. Um and if I had just been like, no, she's probably busy, or she maybe doesn't want to work with me specifically or whatever. If I got hung up on any of that, then that moment wouldn't have happened. Um which would be a huge shame because it changed my life.
always got to shoot your shot.
You have to shoot your shot. You
You
miss
have to
100% of
shoot
the
your
shots you
shot.
don't take. Didn't Michael
Exactly.
Scott say that?
He did. He did. Um, what do you find most often inspires your writing?
Now, that is a tough question. That is a really tough question. What inspires my writing? My feelings, um, first and foremost. And I think that is true of many, if not most, artists. Um, that even if they may not be writing about their own lived experiences, which I often am not writing about my own lived experiences, but I am writing about feelings that I have about, you know, uh, any sort of situation that might be presented to me, either from a first person or a third person perspective. Um, I think whether I'm coming at it from a lyrics angle or a production angle, I'm thinking about how I'm feeling about something. Um, Past relationships, all the typical touchstones for musicians and producers, um, interpersonal relationships, or just frustrating situations, or happy situations, or sad situations. I'm sort of looking inward and thinking about how I'm feeling uh, in those situations and how that might sound. You know what I mean? I'm also inspired by new and unique production styles, techniques, genres, although I'm very bad about genres. Um, if there's something I hear in another person's music or another artist's music, um, that is like, wow, I've never heard that before. uh how can I do something like that is another sort of inspiration point for me, at least from a production standpoint. I love trying to create something that it's like, even if it like feels familiar in some ways, like how Rain, for instance, um, it has what some might call a very standard like heavy metal breakdown in the middle. Um, what sort of surrounds it, I think, is it's rather unique, at least for me. I don't have any other song that sounds like Rain. I haven't heard a whole lot of other songs that also follow the same sort of structure that Rain has. And so it's looking out for unique ideas, unique sounds, unique song structures, and applying those ideas with um, the human feelings that we have about anything and marrying the two.
Um, I want to circle back to kind of what you first said because it's something that I've thought about recently where it's like stuff I've written recently is like not at all pertaining to any current reality, at least in most cases,
Mm-hmm.
but it is like, those feelings have been felt. And that happens a lot of time. It's like we can write 1,000 songs about the same sort of feeling, but it translates 1,000 different ways. So, how do you think that coming from a place of being rooted in emotion, whether it's starting lyrically or it's starting instrumentally or production wise, how do you think that that sort of vibe, if you will, like manifests itself and turns itself into the story and everything that it becomes if it's not telling that exact lived experience? Does that make sense?
I think so. I think so. You're asking me how, even if I haven't literally lived the experience that I might be singing or writing about,
Mm-hmm.
how can I bring about that story in a song?
Yeah, how does it become the story or even the production from the emotion in itself and then translate? Well, actually, I guess it's more into the lyric direction because it's like, how does that emotion manifest itself into the story that it becomes when it's not a lived experience?
Sure. Um, I think it comes from, being empathetic. I can see when one of my friends is going through something very tough or very, I keep circling back to negative emotions because a lot of my songs are downers. A lot of my songs are about like, either breakups or stressful situations or angsty situations. But, I can see someone going through something amazingly, like they got a stroke of good luck or something great happened in their career or something. Um, and I have always been able to like share that with them, even though it didn't happen to me. I really do mean it when I tell my friends that I'm really happy for you and I'm really happy with you. Um, and so even though it's not maybe for one of my songs that will hopefully be releasing soon, um, it's about circling back to a negative emotion. It's about feeling extremely like trapped in a romantic relationship. I do not feel trapped in my current romantic relationship. I absolutely love the person I'm with for sure, 100%. Um, but we can all relate to perhaps feeling unfulfilled in that thing, even though I may not be experiencing that right now. I know
Mm-hmm.
what it feels like, and I can still go back to how I was feeling then. And it's just about sort of, for me, this might sound awful, but for me, it's about sort of making myself relive those negative things and putting myself through it again, so I can really remember what it felt like and put it to words. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is interesting because I'm the same way. I don't the happy things are harder to write about. It's just like, it's
God, they're
there's
so hard to write about.
it's the negative things that we just want to sort of get off our chest. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like that's kind of how it translates. I think most songwriters sort of write to deal with or to just sort of speak out whatever it is that's the problem at hand, if you will. But yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
always interesting to me how sometimes like I have no necessarily like not really any big complaints about where my life currently is at or how I'm kind of currently vibing. But I've
Mm-hmm.
written some like not so fun things recently. So it's like it's just it's weird how those things sort of just like happen and like come out of us in these sorts of ways, even if they're not, especially if they're not pertaining to the current situation at hand. It's like it would make
Mm-hmm.
sense if I was like not having a good time to be writing stuff about not having a good time, but you know, it's weird how those
Yeah.
sorts of things become what they become.
100%. I had a coworker come up to me after In Good Health, the Linear Process album released. And In Good Health is ostensibly a breakup album. Um, Larissa and I were writing a lot about uh, uh, we were both thinking back to like essentially falling out with friends or other romantic relationships that didn't work out, and we were drawing a lot from those experiences for that album. um and even though those things were way in the past by the time that album come out, I had a coworker come up to me and he was like, dude, are you okay? I was like, yeah. It's a song, it's a song, it's an album. I wasn't when I was writing when I was experiencing those things, but now I am. But I can still write about those things. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to be. I don't have to be in that bad situation to talk about a bad situation.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's interesting how sometimes those memories like just kind of it's just I mean it is it's kind of just like a memory coming back up. It's like, oh, like this dawned on me today and then it just turns itself
Yeah.
into a song again. Like you can like I said,
Mm-hmm.
you can write hundreds of songs about the same sort of thing in a bunch of different ways, you know, because that
Mm-hmm.
feeling still, you know, we know what that's like. We can just tell it different ways and, you know, write it into different sorts of stories and whatnot.
Absolutely.
Um with the genre thing in mind, this question will be fun. If you had to create a new genre around your style of music, what would you call it?
Ava, I am a subscriber to the Why Music podcast channel. I listen, I watch. When I say that I can't pull to mind a single instance where someone had a full on immediate answer to that question and they sat here squirming about how to define themselves in a new genre. Man, I'd be if I had a penny for every time I saw that, I'd be rich. Or I'd at least have as many pennies as you have episodes. I don't know, man. I'm bad at genres. I'm bad at genres. My new Rain, his like it's like there's electronics, there are heavy metal guitars. It's all in there. Um uh No Response and Veins, both from the Linear Process album. Those both No Response, Veins, and Love Run Dry, all from the Linear Process album, all three started as an exercise just for me to like try to make some lo-fi beats. Um, and that eventually became something else. And the end of Veins has like a noise rap verse. You know what I mean? I'm awful with genres. I like everything. And I try to incorporate what I like in my music. Um, so I will answer this question, though. It might not be a satisfactory answer. So I'm going to ask you repeat the question one more time because I have to answer this question down to the letter. What's the wording of the question?
If you had to create a new genre around your style of music, what would you call it?
I would call it fun and cool. One word, fun and cool. No spaces, no caps.
I still can't get over it. And no one likes this question, but that's why I like asking it.
It's tough. It's a
It's tough. It's
really
tough. I
hard
don't know what I
question.
would say necessarily. I've like
Uh-huh.
tried answering my own questions in my head, and I'm like, there's a few different answers that come to mind every time, but none of them I love. It's hard because it's
Hmm.
like it's hard enough to kind of try and put yourself in the bucket of, oh, I make like this kind of pop, or like I make a like indie rock, but it's like, is it really
Hmm.
like even what do we call like there's so many
Yeah.
different sorts of elements to it all that it's hard, and I get it, but it's great branding if you can figure it out. So
God, it's such good branding, and I've never cracked it. I've never cracked it. The best that Larissa and I could do for the Linear Process album, which again I just said has just a bunch of different shit in it. Um, the best that we could come up with was indie pop, and like I guess in a way that's right, but it doesn't. That's not. It's not all indie pop.
no.
You know, I don't know, man. But you have to choose something. You have to choose,
Right.
and it's an unfortunate that you
Mm-hmm.
have to choose one descriptor. I find it limiting, but I get it. I understand why. But it's tough, man. It's a tough thing to deal with, especially for indie artists
Mm-hmm.
in the age that has been developing since Napster, where everything is available, and we're consuming so many different pieces of media that all are pulling from a billion different
Mm-hmm.
touchstones and inspirations themselves. Eventually, it's all going to blend together in different amounts for different people, one way or another. I don't think I can think of any indie artist that I listen to right now that neatly fits into one thing.
Yeah, I think that because I've been thinking about it lately, and I was like, I feel like the world and the time period of the like super fan, like diehard, like with the exception of like your Swifties and stuff like that, there aren't a ton
Sure.
of like we're not living in the diehard fan sort of era that I feel like we like pre-streaming things used to be,
Mm-hmm.
because having everything at our fingertips, you can be casual. It's more likely you're going to be like a casual fan of like 100 different artists than like a diehard fan of like 10, because you don't have to buy the album anymore. You can listen to one song and
Sure.
develop a fan base. So I think that with that sort of accessibility has expanded our like palettes, if you will, and it's
Mm-hmm.
now become just sort of second nature to be a jack of all trades rather than a like um category of one.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I have two things in response to that. The first thing is that, dude, you cracked me the hell up when you called me a jack of all trades at right at the top of this. I've never been accused of being a jack of all trades, but man, I hope it happens again. That was great. That was super cool. Um, um, and I'll also say, I think this is just a personal feeling. This is
Mm-hmm.
subjective, but I feel like it's a shame that we're not in. Shame is putting it strongly, but I'll say I am a diehard fan.
Mm-hmm.
You were saying, and I don't disagree that we're sort of out of the age of diehard fans.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I still am of the mindset that like I find an artist that I really dig and I do a deep dive into their stuff and I have their albums, their discographies on repeat for the rest of my life. And I add new artists into that list. I always am, but like I have never been the kind of person that um just hears one song and goes, "Oh, that song is really cool. I'll add it to my, my repository of songs I like." And then someone comes up and says, "Oh, who is this?" And I go, "I don't know." That's never been me. That's never been me. I'm like, "Oh, this artist is clipping. They've been together for however long clipping has been together. They do this, this, and this. Their names are this. They are I could give you the histories and all the trivias of all of their albums. I get into it, you know what I mean? And I think it's a shame that perhaps that is leaving us a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I stand in agreement with like like if I hear an artist's like song, it's not like I'm just like not gonna check anything else out. I've literally spun that on its head and used it as a marketing tactic. But
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
yeah, I did a BuzzFeed quiz, and it gave you, as like once you filled out, it was like a personalized recommendation of, here, this based on your answers, this is the song from my album for you. It gets you in the door, listen to the rest
Ooh,
of it, have fun. But
that's awesome.
I'm with you on that. Like I will never like not listen to probably at least half or more of the rest of your discography, depending on
Right.
how much there is at the time. Um,
That's true.
but
That's
I
true.
do think that it's like, I also at the same time, I mean, I'm a big social media person. And so like I'm finding all of these artists on TikTok and finding stuff from there. And it's like, I will probably potentially only know you from this one song, because it's like, it would be such a task for every time I find an artist with a song I like to
Mm-hmm.
just pop over and do all the things. But, so I mean, I am both in a way. Like I have the people that
Yeah.
I like know everything about and like know all the things of, but I also think there's just so much good music that I don't have enough brain capacity to know that about everybody, you know?
There's not enough minutes in the day.
No. No. If if I had a few extra
No, I
hours
get it.
maybe, but yeah.
I appreciate that, especially in sort of your line of work. You can't often afford to do all the deep dives on every single artist that comes through your door.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. I don't envy you that.
That's fair. I wouldn't envy me either. um is there a song that you've written that you think best embodies who you are as an artist? Your one song Costco sampler.
Song Costco sampler. That's so funny. Um, God, now that is tough. That is tough. Um, I'm very bad about picking one thing. If someone asks me like, "What's your favorite?" Whatever, I always give them like a top three or a top five because I'm very bad about just picking one thing. Um, I'll say it might just possibly be bias right now because it's the new song, but my new song Rain.
Hear the sound, thunder pounds, run and hide as it burns the ground. Lightning strikes with all its might. The earth is laid to waste this black night. Pray for day, we're dead anyway. We're gone tomorrow. Wait for death. He hears your breath. So give up your sorrow tonight. Regret shows.
Once again, it's been with me for over a decade. Um, it has kind of sort of a little bit of everything in it, which I love. That's what I like to listen to in my free time. Songs that have like a little bit of everything. Um, uh, but God, it's tough. Damn it, Ava, because there's also like Happier Now on In Good Health, which also has like a little bit of everything. It leans sort of more in like that indie popish direction, but there's still like a rap verse in there, and I do some cool production swells and stuff like that, which is a lot of fun, and I think is very indicative of me.
Mm-hmm.
as a producer. I could say the same about No Response, which is the next song on that album. Okay. We'll put this on the record. Let the record show that my answer to this question, at least for now, is the song Rain. Um, but there's so many honorable mentions. I could keep going. I could list all of my songs and I would feel correct in saying that.
It, again, it's like picking the genre. It's hard in the way of
Yeah.
like picking a favorite, and like, you know, especially being in, the indie part is, being an indie artist is like, you're pretty, you're one song to the next is probably a little more different than the more seasoned like label artists or whatever and whatnot.
Yeah.
Because we can do whatever we please, and that's great, but at the same
Mhm.
time it's like, no brand here at times. It gets a little all over the place, but we have fun with it. That's what matters.
Mhm.
But that, it allows for that difference. So it's hard to pick one that's kind of all encompassing, because it's like, if you
Mhm.
pick one, it's like, but these other ones could also be good fits because they have this going on with them and whatnot.
Yeah.
I get it.
It's so, and I so envy independent creators who have found a way to make that sort of little bit of everything, jack of all trades philosophy work for them and their branding. Like, I'm thinking of this is at this point a much bigger creator, but at one point he wasn't. I'm thinking of like Andrew Huang, um amazing music producer, YouTuber. He just came out with a book, which is great. And he has talked about in the past, like, I like doing everything. I like doing a little bit of everything. I like being a jack of all trades. So I'm going to use my YouTube platform to like make that my brand, that like people can come here and as long as I'm sort of presenting it in a way that feels right to me, then me myself is just going to be the brand, and that brand can encompass whatever is interesting to me at that time. And God, it takes a lot of work, but that I'll say that's kind of ultimately that sort of thing would be like the goal for me. Because in a similar way, I I would welcome the attention, but if I became known for only doing songs like Rain or only doing songs like Love Run Dry, then eventually I would feel stifled.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I would want to crank out a song like Woodland Boulevard or Cross Your Mind or something like that. So ultimately, and I think that's sort of the goal of every independent artist, um, where they just put out stuff that they like and other people like too, and pay rent with it
If possible.
if possible. That'd be
If
great.
possible. Yeah, no, I it's interesting to me because it's like, I get that, and I feel like I have a little bit more of a refined sound in a way, but at the same time,
Mhm.
it's like, I don't know what I'm doing next. Maybe I don't know what, like, I've had different things that have dabbled into different areas, but then we look at artists that have, album after album, they're different. Like Lady Gaga has gone through several different phases. Taylor Swift has her
Mhm.
like eras and stuff like that. Different bands like Imagine Dragons isn't the same thing that it was like 12 years ago.
That's
Every like
true.
they've taken different phases and done all these different things. It's like, what is it about what they're doing that has kept you around from one project to the next? And what is it that they're offering in that way that's like, what is it that's still Lady Gaga 3 albums later? You know
Mhm.
what I mean? It's like that
Mhm.
kind of question. I don't know. But the answer to that would be
Yeah,
great to have, because then we'd be able to
dude.
kind of
I
figure it out.
Yeah, you're totally right. You're totally right. And I think about that often as the biggest Linkin Park fan that you will ever meet. I think about that because, of course, they're sort of famous for after Meteora and getting into Hybrid Theory or Minutes to Midnight. Um, every album, they sort of, to some uh uh greater or lesser extents make the next album sound completely different. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
um there were always tropes that they sort of came back to, and that was sort of like the Linkin Park sound. But ultimately, like, it's really tough to compare A Thousand Suns and The Hunting Party, for instance. And those albums were there was only one in between, essentially. And Living Things, it's really tough to compare Living Things to a lot of The Hunting Party. So that's sort of like unlocking that secret. I'm with you. Is like, how do I do that? Give it to me, Mike Shinoda. Give it to me right now, please. I need it.
Yeah, it's tricky. That's why I always say that they will come for the music, but they will stay for the artist. But so you just kind of have to
Yeah.
look at it in the way of like, what is it about you as an artist that is giving them something to invest in? And I
Mhm.
think honestly, in the indie age, as hard as it can be, it's consistency. It's new music more than once every 6 months. And
Yeah.
it's because if that's the game we're playing right now. It's like everything is what's front of mind. It's
Mhm.
not, you can't, nobody's deep diving in that sort of way to, I don't know where I was going with that, to be completely honest. I had a
Just
thought and then
about
it just
how
left.
it's the thing I was taking away was that it can be hard to cultivate. Well, maybe we weren't saying that it's too hard to cultivate in the age. I think what you were saying is that in the age of streaming, of TikTok,
Mhm.
of YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, things like that, um, it can be tough, perhaps, to cultivate that sort of um, that artist image if you're doing a lot of vastly different projects, perhaps.
Mhm.
Um, and I'll say, from like a marketing standpoint, um, that is so that's it's honestly one of the biggest things that I struggle with, because um as I said, am the kind of person that will do the deep dive. I will live with a single band for years and years and be a-okay. They dropped an album 3 years ago and I'm still listening to it, and I'm not feeling like I'm starved for new stuff. You know what I mean? And so for me personally, that's sort of like, um all right, it's been 6 months, where's your next thing? God, it's so hard. It's
It's
so
hard.
hard for me. um I think it's hard for a lot of indie artists. Many Some people are doing it so well. I feel like I'm seeing a new Connor Price Instagram reel every week. And I don't know how he does it, because he has like great editing and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And he
he's
has like a
doing a
new
lot.
song every month. Yeah. Good for him. Good for him. I wish I could. I won't say I wish as if it's something like I will never do, because obviously that's what we're all working for, right? But um, God, I'd love to have just like a chat with him or someone like him that we could just like pick each other's brains and stuff like that. It'd be great.
Yeah, and I think and I think I've done some content about this idea recently. Is it's like we're living in the age of releasing singles, but we still need to be living in the age of creating albums,
Yeah.
in terms of like going through those stages instead of going through mini stages with every single. I think that's the big
Mm-hmm.
killer. So, but that is a soapbox that I will not get onto yet today.
Get
Um,
on it. Get on it. Let me hear it.
we're moving on. We're moving on before I go down any more
Ah,
rabbit holes.
sure.
We'll save that for after hours. Um,
Okay.
if you had to
Why
pick,
music after dark? Sorry.
no, you're good. If you had to pick two or three artists that you think your music is like a combination of, who would it be?
Two or three artists that I think my music is like a combination of. Well, Linkin Park, who has been my earliest and most constant inspiration. Um, For a lot of my newer stuff, I'm thinking about bands like the Pineapple Thief, um, UK based progressive rock. Love those guys, and oh god, they crank out material. Anyway, um, so many albums. So we're talking Linkin Park, we're talking Pineapple Thief. I'm gonna throw in another favorite of mine called Clipping. Um, Noise rap trio. David Diggs is the main MC. Um, sorry if you heard that. That's my dog. Um, their production is sometimes it's unlike anything I've ever heard. Um, which is exactly the sort of thing I love. And you said two or three, so I'll stop there. Although there's lots more.
There's always lots more. It's hard to pick three. I find that people often have like a top two, and then that third one just is like one of like five options, and it's hard because again, we come from such a easy access. We can listen to whoever we want, whenever we want. So you're kind of a product of all of it. So it's hard to pick two or three, but not at all surprised Linkin Park came up again because
you shouldn't be. You
that's
shouldn't
right
be.
that's right on the board.
People who know me, if you asked me that question and I didn't say Linkin Park, I would be getting texts like, "Are you okay? Where are you? What do they do with you? Was there someone like with a gun behind the camera that's going to shoot you if you said Linkin Park? Because what is wrong with you if you didn't say it?" No, people. Oh, it's so funny. My friend Andrew Pemberton, who features on Rain, who features on Timing, and a few other upcoming projects of mine. Whenever he would ask me like, so what sort of like style are you thinking for this, or what sort of like sound are you thinking, and I would always send him a Linkin Park song as reference, and he does not like them, or at least nearly not as much as I do. So he was like, you gotta send me something else, bro. There has to be something else that also sounds like what you're going for, that doesn't have LP on it somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, you like what you like, you know what you know. Not
Like
everybody's
what you
gonna hop on the
like.
bandwagon. I get it.
Well, more for me.
What is an outside passion of yours that you feel impacts who you are as an artist?
D&D. Easy. If I were not doing music, I would somehow be trying to find a way to monetize like playing D&D, like actual play shows. um I'm talking Critical Role, I'm talking Dimension 20, which is my favorite. Dude, I love playing tabletop games so freaking much. It's such a creative outlet in, I would honestly say, kind of it scratches a similar itch as like writing songs for me. Running narratively focused games, where I and four or six of some of my best friends or new people that I've just met are improvising our way through what can sometimes be very like complex emotional situations, but all sort of in the space of having graph paper and nachos in front of you. uh it's magical. There's nothing else like it. Yeah, man, I don't know who I would be today if it weren't for tabletop games. And I that sounds funny, but I really do kind of mean that.
Tabletop games or Linkin Park?
If you Ava,
You
oh,
led
what's
me
the time?
right
I gotta
to
go.
it.
Sorry, this is fun. This has been fun. Thanks, I gotta go. God, that's unfair.
You
That's
led me right
unfair.
to it.
Listen, okay. Fuck. um I think I still have to give it to Linkin Park. Unfortunately, they were my first love. They're my first love. But listen, we can be in an open marriage, me and Mike. me and Mike and Jeremy Crawford, who is the lead designer of Dungeons and Dragons right now. We can be in a throuple. I'm okay with it. I just happen to be married to Mike first.
I don't know. I don't know how to come back from that. I know I dug that
sorry.
hole, but I didn't have any intentions of climbing in it.
If there's one thing you can count on me for, it is committing to any bit, and I will die on any hill.
I respect it. I respect it. Moving into something new that I kind of started last episode and am continuing in this one is the previous artist is writing a question for next week's artist. And so last week's artist gave me the question of what is a bucket list item within your artist project that you haven't yet checked off?
Within my artist project.
Mm-hmm. Like a music related bucket list thing.
Yeah, sure. Dude, if I could get a full like orchestra on some of my stuff, that would be I will have made it at that point. That would be so cool. I have some string playing friends that I'm working with currently. And I love them. I love them to death, and they're so great. And we're making such great magical stuff. I keep using the word magical, but it's kind of perfect. But dude, if I can get like a whole symphonic orchestra on something, with that huge wall of sound that they can put out and the thick lush just waves of music that you can sort of allow yourself to be engulfed by, dude, that would be amazing.
That would be really cool. As someone who loves putting strings on things, I second that. That'd be dope. Yeah, that's a great item to have on the list. What is your question for next week's artist?
See, as I was answering my question, also in the back of my mind, I was like, fuck, I'm gonna have to think of something quick. My question for next week's artist is going to be said in a moment. Hold, please hold. Please hold. We're thinking. Please hold. My question for next week's artist is this. And they can take it as a challenge if they like. I would love it if they actually did this.
Oh my God.
If you could make a whole song with one instrument, and I mean like a real instrument. Real. I don't mean real as like a pejorative or a negative, but like I'm talking about like an acoustic guitar or a grand piano or a trumpet or something. So we're discounting like synths or like the Ableton Push or keyboards or something like that. We'll say acoustic instrument. What would it be and why? And also, please go do it.
What would your answer be? I really hope
your next art. My answer would be the piano.
Okay,
I'm with you on that instrument. I love playing it. Yeah,
I'm with you on that one. That I think guitar could be cool too, but I had a vision for. I did this like independent study thing, and we were doing like different recording techniques with the piano, and I had this like vision. This was unfortunate that it was like the COVID semester where everything shut down in the middle of the semester, but it was like I was like, oh, like what we could do is like we could make a song out of like different like thing, like like different with the different recording techniques. You could put them in, do all the different things and make like a whole thing out of it. But that sadly did not happen. So might have to though. That'd be kind of cool.
That would be cool. What would be awesome is if we had like 12 artists and each artist made one song. And each of those artists chose a different instrument. So it was like, and a single album of 12 songs of 12 instruments, but all like their own. I don't know. That might be kind of neat.
That would be cool.
You know what I'm
Be
saying?
an interesting market for that, but that would be really cool.
I think you and I can make it work. By which I mean, I think you can make it work because you know marketing stuff and I just know music theory.
It's the perk of the collaborative effort, you know?
That's what I'm saying, dude.
What is it that you think sets you apart from other different or other independent artists?
Uh that's an interesting thing. And it's something I always sort of think of as like, I really should probably have an answer for this for marketing reasons. Um, that's a tough one for me to answer specifically because it sort of implies this sort of like competitive like you should listen to me instead of this other person. You know what I mean? um which I don't super love, although I do of course understand that we're in a market where even though it is creative, there is some amount of competition. Of course, I get it.
Mhm.
So I would say that when you listen to me, you are listening to um, production styles, techniques, choices that um, I feel like there isn't enough of. And by which I don't just mean like uh, how I use the DAW or plugins. I'm also talking about song structures, music theory concepts, anything that goes into the production of the music itself. Um, I am always shooting for something. Something about it is like, I am saying there should be more of this sort of thing out there. Um, and I try to sort of champion that, like, um, I don't know, underdog ideas. I don't know how else to say it. Um, and I think that is sort of my calling card as an artist.
I think that's like a new take in a different way, and I like it in terms of like usually it's like, you know, like we're always a product of what we listen to, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in some way, shape, or form. You're taking elements from everything that you're consuming, and that's ultimately what's going into what you're creating. But
For sure.
in your in your way, it's more of like an intentional, like, okay, like I hear this. Why is it taking me so long to hear this? Why do I not hear this more often? And it's like
Yeah.
sort of bringing those things to light rather than just taking it as a product of your environment, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like the way you said it. We're going to go with that. We're going to put your answer on the record for me.
I'll take it. What impact do you want to have with your music and with your artistry?
um, I hope to have the same impact that other artists have had on me, which is, this is so cool and unique. And even though there may be some songs that I don't particularly like I said before, I'm the biggest Linkin Park fan that you will ever meet, but they have songs I don't like, right? Even though there may be some songs that don't jive with the listener, I hope that my overall sort of takeaway is that there's something special here, there's something unique, um, and perhaps something to um, I don't want to say learn from, as if I'm some sort of like mentor figure to people, but there's maybe something to be gained from um, not just listening to it as a casual listener, but also sort of critically listening to the music and what the, again, I'll use the word production of the music as a whole might be trying to say, and
Yeah, I
then do
mean,
a deep dive and listen to more full albums instead of just singles.
exactly. Yeah, I think you kind of said point blank what the conclusion that I draw from a lot of these sorts of answers with this that I get, which is we are just passing the torch. music
Yeah.
impacted us in this everlasting way. And so by being creators of it, we're just trying to emulate that sort of experience for someone else in what we're creating, because that's what happened for us. Which I think is great, because it's like, you're trying to pay it forward essentially and pass it on in like a positive way. It's not like passing down bad habits, it's passing on like good experiences, which I think is a great outlook to have on such a creative and explorative, if you will, sort of thing.
Yeah, I like it. We're not just creators of products. We are creators of art. We're cultivators of a much larger sort of culture of, like you say, shared experiences and emotional I just had the word, man. You ever just fumble so hard at the end of what you're saying?
Yep.
You get what I'm saying. I agree with you. Yeah, some passing along, I like what you say, passing along the torch of this sort of uh deeply satisfying creative endeavor.
I think that brings us to the last question, which you
No!
probably already know, which is why music?
Why music? Because why anything else? Honestly. There's not to be super like cliche and like quote a movie, but there is a line in the great movie Dead Poet Society with Robin Williams, where he's talking to his students and he says, science, engineering, mathematics, those all allow us to live and they are great and should be hailed for that reason. But also art and music and beauty is why we live, in the sense that it's like it's what we live for. You know what I mean? I wish I wrote that. I should really look up who the writers on that movie was, because it's beautiful. So why music is like, why would I want to do anything else when I'm not good at science, engineering, or math?
Fair enough.
And to that point, like I've talked to a lot of friends of mine who are musicians, but who don't want to make music their career. And when I ask them why, they say, because music is, for me, it's an escape. If I'm feeling stressed out or down about something, then music can help me lift me up, which I super understand. And their point is they don't want to turn that into like a stressful thing. They don't want to take the fun out of it. So they don't want to make it their career. And I do get that. I 100% get that. For me, it's always been, music is the only thing worth stressing about. Like I don't want to be getting upset over something that isn't emotionally satisfying.
Yeah, I think it is worth the blunders that come along with being independent and your own boss in that way. It's the there's a lot of good that comes from that, in terms of like how liberating it can be to make it all happen yourself and to do all of the things. And I think, like, I'm a huge advocate for the independent thing. I mean, we're here doing this. I do like all these other things, all independent centric. But I think the beauty of being independent is it's something that you can grow from the ground up, in terms of you can work to the point of this being a sustainable thing, versus if you jump into any sort of like deal or something like that, you're signing on for certain projects that you have to muster up, and you don't know necessarily if they're going to pay off or not. Obviously there's hope and, input that it will, because somebody is essentially indirectly sort of paying you to do this, kind of, by funding the project, I guess. I don't really know how all that works, but I don't care to. But to build it to a point where it's sustainable is a lot healthier in my mind than to be forced into creating X amount of albums to hope that they do well enough that the people that paid for them are happy and that you can get something back out of it too. It's like you're only really going like this rather than shooting for this and watching it potentially fall back down.
Absolutely. Exactly what you were describing is what, like, my friends were saying, like, I don't want that to happen to me. And listen, I get it. I don't want necessarily that specific thing to happen to me either. Because like you say, it takes the artistry out of it. It can take the artistry out of it if you're just doing it to please some like corporate boss, you know what I mean? And that's why I love independent artists. It's why I love independent music. It's why I love what you're doing with this podcast, sharing the sort of independent artistry culture that we're trying to cultivate, and that I think is honestly doing well. It's only going up, I think, we can hope that it's only going up for independent artists as a whole. And I think it is in the age of streaming and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just going to continue to grow as things get more and more accessible and there's more and more different platforms and outlets created and stuff like that. So it's a good place to be. Hopefully stays that way.
Yeah, hopefully.
With that, I think that concludes this episode of the Why Music podcast. Check back again next week for another conversation with another independent artist. Thanks for listening.